Good morning and welcome to another episode of Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. Happy to have you here in our brunch time to talk about education as we do every morning, because we care about kids and we care about the nation's young people getting the best that they can get every single day so that they can grow to be the people that we want them to be and that they want to be. Today, we are going to talk about a subject and a topic that we have not covered here before. We have talked about dang near everything, but we have not talked about teacher burnout. So that's what we were going to talk about today. Educators walking into your schools every day. There's people like me that talk about education from a distance. I'm talking as a parent. I'm talking as somebody who, maybe a voter, a taxpayer, a community member, but I'm not talking as somebody who has to walk in a classroom every day and look at like 30 to 40 your little angels who you think are little angels, and sometimes they're not little angels or whatnot. Right. Well, yeah, there you go. So I'm not one of the people, though, who's responsible for facing that down, staring that down, looking at these kids and thinking every night, okay, what I did yesterday didn't really work. It didn't land. Tomorrow, what I'm going to do is such and such and whatever, and having that be like a every night thing where you have to think that through. And while you're working very hard and you're trying to make it happen for all the kids in your classroom, and you do care, and you're trying to do your best, you get a million messages that tell you you're not adding up. It's not working out. You didn't get this part right, or, and then you're sitting through hours of mindless professional development that doesn't help you do anything. Doesn't help you be better in the classroom at all. It's just some people talking, and every now and then there might be some consultants that come in who don't teach, and they're talking, and then you have a principal who probably have never taught. You got yourself a principal who may have taught but was a bad teacher, don't know whatever, and he's telling you or she's telling you, and you're like, that's all you see. That's all you hear. Well, my guest today, Teresa Lasley, runs an organization specifically aimed at helping teachers who are at risk of burning out to not burn out, to feel appreciated, to feel affirmed, and to feel like somebody cares about them. And this is exactly the thing that's missing from all this debate about education, because we do have a nation. I don't want to go through all the stats, but what I tell you right now is, nationally speaking, it is a problem that we may lose a lot of teachers right now that we don't know we're going to lose. Like there's that teacher right now who's going in the classroom as we speak right now, is wrapping up her classroom. Yeah, mentally has already decided, this is my last year, and you don't know about it. So let's talk about it. Teresa Lasley, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, let's talk about burnout, because it's a very present thing. And Instructional Gym came out of my own experience of burnout. I've been in a classroom teaching for 16 years now, and I've walked through times of burnout on 2 occasions where I, just like some of these teachers we speak to that are considering it now, decided that this is it for me. I've given all that I can give. And a lot of that was attributed to the fact that I wasn't being replenished, and I wasn't in some ways feeling seen for what I was coming in and day out to do, in order to have greater impact for students. So what I really found necessary, just through the conversations with my colleagues, is that I'm not in isolation with this experience. This is something that is happening throughout districts and school buildings across the nation. And if we do not get in front of this now, then we're really going to be at a very, this idea of closing gaps and tailoring education to meet the needs of students will be even greater, because we haven't equipped teachers to, one, be their best selves, and one, to sustain them in classrooms where they're building relationships that nurture and grow understanding for students. So that's more or less what I have began with Instructional Gym. Professional developments that are not conventional, ones that really speak to you as a person, you using your passion, you being clear about how you show up in a space and what your show up individually, specifically you, does for building student understanding and shaping the trajectory they take in life.
If you had to estimate, how big do you think the problem actually is with teacher burnout? Like, your colleagues, the people teachers you might talk to other places, like problem, big problem, crisis. Like, how big a problem do you actually
think? Crisis is a community issue.
Oh, really?
I think sometimes we make it in isolation to schools and education, but this really becomes a community issue. Imagine every single year your seventh grade teacher is being a new teacher every year. Like, you're not able to build the toolkit. You don't really get the swing of teaching until you're maybe 5 years, and you may have the energy as a first year teacher, but really understanding the dynamics of educating students comes with time and experience. So we're continuing to turn teachers over, then our impact becomes less and less, and we're really not speaking to the problem of growing students to be productive and contributing citizens to our society. So it's no way that we can look at this in isolation any longer as an education problem, but we must look at it as, how does this impact our overall community? Where do we see turnover the most, right? Maybe in urban settings, right? And then
Yeah.
what do we know about statistics around data for students in urban settings? So it's not in isolation in any way of the impact of not addressing the problem with teacher burnout, and then looking at again the statistics of performance for students, and not necessarily just all weighted down by these standardized tests, but just being able to exist and navigate the world around them if we're not preparing them to do just that.
What are some of the, like, what do you think are the biggest contributors to, if I was a teacher in a classroom in one of these districts where the kids need a lot of help, what would be the main things that I would be experiencing that you think contributed to me, like at some point, just burning out, being done with the job?
I think sometimes we need to prioritize what is the focus. Sometimes everyone is being overwhelmed, right? Teachers, but not even just teachers, administrators, district level people, because money is tied to student performance on assessments. And if that students are already lagging behind for whatever reason previously, I come into a classroom ready to teach a curriculum that a student can't quite access. And if I haven't been given the tools to bridge that gap in a way, then that's already one thing that I'm combating against. Trying to figure out or to balance where you are as a student, because I must meet you where you are. At the end of the day, I have to grow you as a person, but also the demands of what is required at this grade level or what's required for the standardized test. So testing for sure is a contributor to burnout. Also, just creating a culture in a community that sometimes is missing. You feel like I'm fighting all these battles by myself. I'm taking on all these roles, right? Not having boundaries that really let the workday in. As you said, I go home and I'm thinking about, I call it the profession of the pivot, right? Because I'm consistently and constantly pivoting to meet the needs of students, but then who is pivoting to meet the needs of me? Understanding that this is a large undertaking to be effective in a classroom, to really impact students in a way that they can continue forward, that there's progress. And then sometimes not really being able to teach things that one speak to you, that are tailored to the student population before you. Are we really addressing things that will allow them to understand the world around them? How important is what we're instructing to their own growth and development? So I think at least those three rocks for sure are things that contributed to teacher burnout. And then salary. I'm in Washington, D.C., one of the highest paid salaries, but it's Washington, D.C. is one of the most demanding and living expenses in the nation. So I'm doing all these things and I can't even sustain myself. I'm struggling. I have no outlet. I can't do things that will be focused on my self-care. A vacation? No, I'm working summer school. I can't take a vacation. I got to work summer school so I can pay the bill. So I think definitely just reevaluate, and then the positioning, like how are we as a nation really honoring teachers? Like, it's not a profession looked upon in the same way sometimes as you may see like doctors, and we are life shaping and saving us just as well. So like, how are we putting the profession of teaching on a higher plane so that it is valued differently? And then these things happen automatically. We see teaching in this higher light, then we start to value the teachers that are doing this very work.
I mean, what would be ways that you would see that that the public and the community could do better to value I mean, like, what will we be doing? We'd be bringing y'all cakes. Like, here's a
No,
cake I
because
baked
then
for
we're
you.
going to
What will
gain
we do?
weight. Eat
I
the
mean,
cake. I
I
don't.
hear this all the time. Like, it's not valued. It's not valued. I did read. So maybe you can help me understand this too, because
Sure.
I didn't understand this. There was an article from the NEA that basically said, know the difference between like teacher burnout and teacher demoralization. And I was like, okay. So those are okay. Tell me more about like in some cases it's burnout. Maybe the job just might be tough or whatnot. In other cases, you're literally doing things that demoralize the teacher. And I don't think we see that as the public, like what those things might be that make you feel like demoralized. And you're saying now, like value the profession, value our teachers. What will we do differently as the community and the public to make a teacher know that that's how we feel about them, like we value you?
Well, first and foremost, like really equipping teachers to be effective at their work. A lot of teachers walk into classrooms and it's kind of fair game, like figure it out. And some of this it's an organic experience. You need to be innovative as you adjust and meet the needs. But we also have to be really clear about what does it mean to equip a teacher to do the work that we're asking them to do. I shouldn't walk into a classroom with students who are not performing, let's say on grade level, and yet I have no idea how to get them where they are. I
Mm,
may have a curriculum, but I don't have the other pieces that make sense. One, for me to instruct, but two, for students to even understand where I'm coming from. So for me, I think value in the profession is really understanding the disparities within the education system in a way that you are being specific to the needs of the students, right? But that comes through providing teachers with their needs. So resources and sometimes it's an overload of resources. Like you want me to do 10 different programs with students. I'm still trying to understand this one program. Let
yeah.
me figure this one out. Let me be
Yeah.
the like let that be the data study around how I 5 days a week streamline this program and its effectiveness for my student body. It's difficult for me to do. I mean, there was one time I was teaching, I worked in and outside of the classroom. I was teaching multiple preps and coaching 3 or 4 different grade levels. It's not
Mm,
sustainable. Like, and
mhm.
the expectation of that is really like you're walking me right into a trap of failure. So being really
Mhm.
intentional about the focus for each individual teacher and then allowing that to be what you measure for their effectiveness. Like trying to throw me in with 100 things, although they may need to be addressed, I'm one person.
Mhm.
And to do that in a 3 months period is unreasonable. And I think sometimes when you are being unreasonable in that expectation, then you're asking me to ignore boundaries. And if I ignore boundaries, then I'm not a good teacher. And
Mhm.
that's not fair because I have an entire life that I'm nurturing. You're a mom, you're caring for an elderly parent, whatever it be, you're watching TV, whatever your thing is your thing that you're entitled to have. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes we are so driven by the end result that we do not nurture the process that gets us there. And then teachers, they waver and they make decisions about coming back. And I can't tell you that I'm not coming back. So imagine our initial comment. It's a teacher right now who's in their classroom who already knows they're not coming back next year. This
Mhm.
teacher cannot tell their administration because there is some fear, maybe retaliation to the point of demoralization. So
Mhm.
what happens is you don't find out till the end of June, July, and then you have 2 months to find someone to replace that's qualified and ready. It may or may not happen. We come back into August with students with a substitute teacher that may not even know this subject matter or that's not degreed or highly qualified in this way, but they are a physical body that can be in a space to quote unquote uh, just be with the children so they're not alone. So
Mhm.
this is why it becomes a community issue because we haven't created a culture where I can publicly say I won't be returning next year for what X, Y, and Z reason. So that's the demoralization part that we haven't created. The bureaucracy in education does not support entirely student growth and
Mhm.
teachers further development.
Do you lay that at the feet of the bigger bureaucracy, or do you think that a lot of that is at the feet of the principal? Are the principals fighting an uphill battle themselves, or are they just not doing enough to make sure that their teachers are supported in the right way?
I think principals do what they know. I think
Hmm.
the same given of as you are more seasoned in your role, then you have a different understanding of how to lead a building. I
Hmm.
think there's different leadership styles that for certain communities work better. It could be specific to who is in that building. It works better for this group of people in this building than it does for others. Um, I think it is a larger issue. I think some of the very things of like start times for school, like these are things that have been defined a century ago, like years ago,
Yeah.
and yet we have yet to change. We were presented with a pandemic. We are going right back to the building the same way we left it in 2019. So
Mm.
and it's not something probably that you can address because that seems like enough time to make some changes, but it's still not a lot of time to make these um, larger um, decisions around what education should look like to really serve students. And I think that is part of what sometimes stresses the stress
Hmm.
of teaching, environments that don't feel supportive. Those are all contributors to burnout for teachers. I mean, we could just say, you can ask any teacher, what happens in your teacher lounge? What's that
Mm. Mhm.
conversation?
I've heard about that too. I haven't been in it, but boy, I've gotten some reports from the teachers' lounge that are scary.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's
you
not.
just mentioned something that I just
Mhm,
thought was like amazing. You kind of went by it real quick, but I
oh,
mean, we have this opportunity right now to actually not do the same things that we've been done before. And when you just said, it kind of gave me chills when you said like we're possibly going to just go right back to the way that things had been before that weren't good. And you had one very concrete example right now. There's no reason that we have to go back to the same start times that we had before,
mhm,
because we actually know that there's something wrong with the morning. There's something wrong like with morning and the way we do morning for children in America.
mhm,
And there's a lot of schools and districts that prior to the pandemic had already started like adjusting start times to try it out. And what some of them found was the early start times really jack up a day for a kid because they're not always fully awake. They're like, especially teenagers as they get older, whatnot. And I don't know where you come down on start times, but what I took from your
not
comment is
early.
that right, like I mean, I've seen a lot of research that just basically says like there's no good reason to make it as early as we make it, right? Like
Mhm,
if you really want kids to have a full morning and get ready and get in and be learners, be real and whatnot,
mhm.
adjust it by a couple of hours, an hour or two, going the right direction helps that. But we have all these bureaucratic reasons to keep it the same way as it is, the same way that
Parents
it's
have to
been.
get to work.
Parents
So
have
we
to get
start
to
school,
work.
so we start
Yeah,
school early. That's a large argument to that point.
yeah.
Um,
Which is true. I mean, in some ways, I don't know how you adjust for that for all families, um, but yeah, we're not. I like your point though that we're not doing everything that's optimal, and there's no good reason to go back right to the way that we did things before. Right now, if you're gonna have burnout, we better be thinking about some ways to adjust the teachers' work life balance.
balance. Mhm.
Not all teachers are in the same situation. I've learned that over the pandemic too. Like you mentioned earlier in this conversation, their parents too. They've got kids too. And sometimes we don't know what their situation is in terms of a partner, no partner, who knows what's going
For
on.
sure.
So you could have somebody who's really struggling, to hold up the balance the same way we are. I'm tough on teachers. I just want you to know
What
because
does
I
that
am.
mean?
I'm tough on teachers. I know it sounds terrible, don't it? I'm tough on teachers. This is what it means. It means that like I get the as parents, you don't see what goes on in the classroom. I don't think teachers get, yeah, but you don't see what it means to be a parent who has done three decades as a parent with kids in schools. I've seen
Mhm.
hundreds of teachers in different capacities. And those experiences have been wildly different. And I know that any single one of those teachers doesn't know about the year that we had when we had a teacher that had a mental breakdown and my child's education was ruined for a year, or the year that we had a teacher that was low-key racist, or the teacher, you know what I mean? Like after, especially you have multiple kids in a school system over multiple decades, and you start to see like different experiences with teachers. So when I say I'm tough on teachers, it's just like I expect a certain set of things to go right. And in some cases they do. In some cases, you look at a teacher, she's mastered everything, organized, communicates well, doesn't call you up in like March saying, you know, your kid is failing and has been the whole year, no stuff like that. Versus teachers who don't do that, right? Like, you know, it's a mixed bag. Not everybody's created equal. So anyways, this is why it's a good conversation for me to talk to you, because there does have to be empathy two directions. Parents have to have empathy for the teacher in the classroom. Teacher has to have empathy for what parents are trying to make happen in their kids' life and in their own lives too. And I love the way you put it. It's a community issue. Like as a community, we should be like working together. It's just, it seems to be a little bit of ignorance about what a teacher is really going through. We don't get to see it every day.
No.
We hear some of the worst.
I think the pandemic may have given some people a glimpse.
Yeah.
With this virtual learning, and you know, I saw all these memes like, "I'll bring the child to your house, teacher, please." Like, I'm so sorry that I ever thought, you know. So I think it gave some parents some insight into the experience. But just as a craft itself, and just as you are building and nurturing, right? A teacher should always be growing in their work, and in this journey as a profession, it's important that we are continuing to be specific, and that we're continuing to be intentional about what exactly serves kids best. And what I really want the larger powers that be to recognize is that if I'm not operating at my best, what I give to students will not serve them to be their best. And oftentimes, like, we think, well, you're an adult, and I said, these are very things, but this is a people profession. So we can't take that part out of it. We can't take that part out, that I show up every day and I take on the energies of other adults. I take on the energies of other children, and I am working to balance those things simultaneously every single day that I arrive to a school building, and understanding that alone requires some level of retreat, just to replenish the vessel so that I can continue to do that type of work. But for me to take, to give, and people to take, and you think that year after year, I'm going to perform at a high level, it really becomes a challenge for a lot of teachers. And we have definitely our unicorns who are able to do that. They found a way to balance it, but it's too many that have not. And it's enough for us to address that as an issue that we need to combat. Like, it's not, oh, well, she just doesn't care. Like, well, you can say that, but what does that do ultimately to serve students in the end? So now you're going to not have her in the classroom. And then now what? You got these 30 students looking for a teacher. So it's a matter of grace. It's about professional development. It's about being able to do the professional development. I think a lot of times, being transparent about your capacity, and then what do you need to then bring in to do the professional development, right? It's interesting that we sometimes think, just if I give them cupcakes, that it'll work. And let's be clear, we want some cupcakes here and there. We need some truly, like, I need you to understand, like, what practices really give me joy in spaces. I can't enter in conversations. Like, I avoided the teacher lounge at my school because I wasn't even sure what the energy would be there. And I know that energy will come with me into the very next class. And even if it's subconscious and I'm not even aware of it, it's going to show up in how I deliver my instruction. And being really clear about those kind of things, because they're really, really small, but they have large impact, is important. So I think, one, acknowledging that first you have to acknowledge it, that it's something that's going to impact student achievement. And until
Mhm.
we do that, it just happens. And teachers quietly leave the profession, or teachers are operating at 50%. And then it's just unfair to students. Ultimately, that's our, our first focus is growing students. And if we're
Mhm.
not really going to make sure teachers are ready to do that, I mean, we're front line, so you can't shoulder shrug to the front line. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes it's a energy of tough it out and be strong. And teachers, some teachers are like, but I don't have any more to tough out. Like I don't have it, so help.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's scary to say help, because help means you're weak. Help means you're not efficient. Help means
Does that mean
trying
like
to get
people are gonna
over.
look
It's an
down on you if you
excuse.
ask for help? People are gonna look down on you if you ask for help, like your
Oh,
colleagues or
absolutely.
others? Really?
People will, because
Yeah.
some people are like, well, it's the mentality of, well, I was able to do it.
Mm.
Well, that's
Mhm.
amazing.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And
Good
I
for you.
congratulate you for
Yeah.
for getting through. But if
Yeah.
someone literally says they need help, we can't act like, if a student comes to you, you're not treating every student the same. If a student comes
Mhm.
and say they need help, then it's an expectation as a teacher that you are doing something different to meet them where they are. So where's
Mm.
the same consideration and grace for teachers? What are you specifically doing different? Yes, you have paperwork, and yes, people from district are talking to you, administrators, but if you don't have the teachers in the building, it's gonna
Mhm.
hold. You may be in the classroom watching
Mhm.
students, when you could be doing other things or responsibilities of the building, to make sure that you're finishing strong. So I think it's a mindset component
Mhm.
that needs to happen. And I think if you give the attention and focus to it, people will start to understand it, because we do understand. We want to appreciate teachers, but as you said,
Mhm.
that sometimes looks like, you know lunch, or
A mug
a mug,
that says you're number
or
one.
a
You're the
car wash,
best
because I
teacher.
love when I
Yeah.
got my car wash at school, right? That was
Really?
amazing.
Okay. Really?
But
Okay.
yes, that eliminated one to do on my list. But like, how do we streamline some of the things that are administrative so that I can really focus on like instruction, teaching and learning and instruction? Some things that what could we do? Like, and what I learned in my own district, one where they took away this idea of taking attendance, like that, you'd be surprised how many teachers are like, oh, I forgot that attendance. And it's a thing, because it's a
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
it's a it's a daily check that has to happen, for
Mhm.
accountability of students. And if anything was to occur, you need to know where students are for sure. But in this virtual setting, my district took away that responsibility, and it's small, but if we were streamlining it for virtual, how could we streamline this then for um, in-person learning? Could it be something that I'm not necessarily having to manage, right? Take it off my plate so that I can be more
Mhm.
innovative in the instruction piece. Because if my specialty is that, my specialty may not be, I may be an organized person. My specialty should be, if I'm an English teacher and I'm an English teacher, is teaching literature,
Mhm.
reading
Mhm.
and literature. If I'm not um the best uh person with paperwork and things like that, well, then how do we streamline some of this so it's not an issue?
You know what? I mean, honestly, it's questions like that that are to me very powerful questions. Like if
Mhm.
we answered them, we would have a different kind of scenario.
Sure.
That it amazes me that we're still having to ask those in 2021. Like this isn't a new discussion to us that it's a heavy workload or for teachers or whatnot. So the
Mhm.
idea in a year, like in a country, let's just do the thing. My grandmother always used to say we could put a man on the moon, but we can't do such and such, right?
Mhm.
And in a country where we have every kind of technology company, every kind of like we got money coming out our eyes and ears,
Mhm.
I think people forget how sterling wealthy America actually is to be talking about a problem like attendance, like teachers taking attendance. There is no better way for you to take some of these things off the plate of a teacher. Like we're still asking these questions around like paperwork. I've heard about for years about special education paperwork for
Oh,
districts, for
yes.
instance.
Yes.
And
A
it's
lot of
like
paperwork.
you haven't figured out as a country how to communicate that information that doesn't require hours and hours and hours of somebody's time in a district to do paperwork. Really, like we're still talking about these dumb things, but yet we want teachers. So I'm this is a great conversation, I think, and I'm happy to hear, because these things are tangible, concrete, and real. when we hear we should value teachers more, they don't seem concrete, like in concrete ways,
Sure.
like like what specifically? Because like
Yeah,
every poll that
streamline
comes
some
out,
practices.
yes,
Give
wash the
me
cars. I heard you car wash.
watch my property. Inside and out, like, because and then being really, it is like I said earlier, it is a profession for people. So like
Mhm,
understanding, like, what does that mean? Like, what do people need who are constantly interacting with people? Like, what things are we putting in place to ensure that the interaction is positive and it's full and it's nurturing in some way? Uh, do you even get training on that? Like, what does it mean to
mhm,
have a full interaction with students? Um, or are we just talking about the scope and sequence of grade 10 curriculum? And we got to
mhm,
talk about both, is what I'm saying. Like, you have to have both, and you have to find a way to balance it. Like, choose the rock of focus, because we can't do it
mhm,
all in one school year. Like, that would be disastrous to think that
mhm,
I'm gonna take
mhm.
on. Are we gonna do all this self-care? Then I'm just overwhelmed. Now you're just using terms because it's buzzy, and I really just want to just sit on
Yeah,
my couch. I don't even want to
yeah.
talk about that anymore. Like, make it meaningful for me, even in my experience of this self-care, so I can then value how it can help me be better. So even if it's really simple, like I work for a school who puts a lot of weight on affirmations, and that has been literally the rock of the school year. Like, how do we affirm students? How do we affirm each other? And then that's it. And that alone starts to change the culture. Like, that alone gives
Mhm,
us community, because we are intentional about the words we speak to one another. And those words, and you might, oh, you're just saying, no, really, they resonate. Even if it's not an immediate recognition of them, they resonate in some way. And that alone is going to push me forward. I can get through this day. You know why? Because a colleague dropped in a chat to me, you're greater than your struggle. And
mm,
that alone, like, you know what? We're going to finish
mhm,
this day strong.
mhm,
It could
mhm.
be just the idea of self talk, just the idea of giving us the resources. And we know students are already equipped. Like, some buildings, like, how are some buildings operating without reading specialists?
Mm,
Like, how is that not a budget line?
yeah. Wow.
Period. Like, we can't even talk anymore because, like, please stop. Like, if my students have
Yeah.
shown delays
Mhm,
behind
mhm,
grade level, and you haven't found a way to not only just put somebody on the budget line, because I don't just want someone in a position, but to really garner a culture that will correct, or at least give students confidence to engage. Like, this is where you start. Students are pulling away, but they don't feel like it's a space for them to be in. I'm getting
mhm,
older now.
mhm,
I don't have the skills that I, quote unquote, should have at this level. And it wasn't enough of a focus on a budget line for that. And for whatever reason, but it can't be a conversation anymore. Like, that means you made a decision, even if it wasn't like outright in your thought, but you made a decision so now I'm in a classroom trying to figure out how to do these both. Again, now I'm doing two
mhm.
positions and then managing the rest of life. And really, that should have always been a budget line.
So we're
And
just not like setting up the smart supports for teachers that are doable. But I would imagine that the pushback on that is like everything is about budget. Like everything is about budget. We don't have budget for so many things. Like we have schools that don't have air conditioning. We have schools that like,
yeah,
come spring or in the beginning of winter in some places they don't have adequate heat even.
mhm,
Um, which is crazy. Like
that is crazy.
I don't know if you were paying attention a few years ago to like Detroit when the teachers were starting to show like rats and like this
Yeah.
half of the school we can't even go in because there's no heat in this half of the school.
That could create trauma. I've worked
Right,
in
really, yeah.
I've worked in I started teaching in New York City. Um and I've worked in buildings with no air, and we literally had to sometimes take a half a class off. Everyone lay your head down, because the fact that we're in school and it's 100 degrees on the fifth floor of a building with no air conditioning, what are we teaching? We're teaching how to stay cool, because otherwise I'm like, I'm stressing you out. I'm stressing myself out. It's not any good that's coming out of this space. I think keep like approach with these kind of questions as a teacher. How do
Mhm,
I how do I create joy in a space and good for learning and instruction for
Mhm.
students. And that is a focus. But if I'm doing all these other things too, that gets lost, and then I'm overwhelmed, and then it starts to look like stress and no boundaries and no money, and I'm eating bad because
Yeah. And meanwhile, you
it's
have
cheaper to
friends,
eat bad. Huh?
you have friends in other occupations meanwhile that you're hooking up with, for lunch or whatever on
We're
weekends, or
gonna
you're
go to this
talking,
restaurant and
yeah.
yes.
And they and they're having a different life
Suddenly.
experience than you having. You're like, well, wait a second, why am I doing this?
Hmm.
When, like, you might be someone where you're like, we went to the same college and you look like you're having a fancy free lifestyle. And
Hmm.
here I am aging, each year, like by 10 years, you
Right.
know,
Because I'm
um,
eating fast food. I'm staying up. Sleep is not happening. Like it just and burnout happens in just about every profession. But just understand that me being connected to the children of our future is something we
yeah.
cannot like. I am directly connected to the future of children and the country for that matter. So
Hmm.
your interest needs to be um, a lot more heightened that I am my best self.
Yeah.
Physically, my best self, mentally, my best self, instructionally, like I have the tools, I've had the training, it was meaningful. And that's such layered work.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
That
That's a
we have
great way to
clear
put it.
direction. I walk into buildings. Whenever I've interviewed for positions, I really want to know what's your vision, because if
Mm.
our visions don't align, that's another thing. Like my vision does not align with the vision of the school. I'm in constant conflict then? Like how I
Hmm.
see education and
Hmm.
how education is modeled in this building. Like you can't just get a teaching job anywhere. It could be to the detriment of you continuing in this career field. Like, but I don't even know that coming into the profession. I'm like, oh, I'm teaching English to fifth graders. Cool. No, if our visions don't align, it will not be a successful year. Or
What I
I'll
notice
withdraw myself in some way.
what I've noticed in a district that I know very well,
Hmm.
that one of the problems was that teachers were placed in the struggling schools, the hardest schools, when they were brand new. And then within a year or two, they could start bidding into other schools. This is back when they had a system of bidding into schools,
Hmm.
like required seniority.
Yeah.
So what you would see is high turnover in the lower performing schools. And the richer, whiter schools actually didn't have to take everybody. So they didn't always have spaces available. But if you got seniority, you could bump other people out of the good buildings. And what the teachers union president said in one of the negotiation sessions, she said it's a rite of passage for teachers to be able to bid into schools with better kids as they get more seasoned. And we were
Yeah.
like, better kids. We were
Yeah, that was a
like,
tough
well,
statement.
yeah,
Mhm.
we were like, well, wait a second. What do you mean those kids aren't? But I mean, it was just, I think that she could have said stuff differently where we would have understood in what the way you're saying it right now, in some of those tougher to serve schools that had concentrated poverty and didn't have all the like parental kind of social capital where parents were like raising $200,000 for the year for different things or whatnot. I mean, we had
Sure.
one school where the parents were actually literally hiring positions. We're like raising the money for an
Yeah.
additional music teacher and stuff like that, right? And the poor schools couldn't compete. Let me ask you this question though: how much are parents contributing to this? When you think about burnout, and I think, okay, this is a partnership between me and you. You got my child for these hours during the day, and you're like, okay, yeah, but this is a partnership. Like I got a job to do here in the building. You have a job to do at home.
Hmm.
How much of your burnout is connected to our relationship, teacher parent?
Um, I mean, it's present for sure. Personally, it wasn't a large contributing factor to my personal experiences with burnout, but I do know that it is one. I think what we need to consider is what is the parent's experience with school, and then
Mm.
how does that influence how they parent and or interact with the school building. I would have parents who, for whatever reason, whatever their negative experience was with education and going to school, I couldn't get them to come to the school. It would have to be like I would have to like have things where we were kind of away from in order to have conversations with them, because something about the school building, like they represented something traumatic in their lives. So just imagine what the interaction is, or really feeling like you may have always been under attack. So your method of supporting your child is attacking the teacher in a way, attacking their professionalism, attacking their ability to teach. And I'm in conversations around things that move me away from doing the work that I decided I wanted to do as a teacher. It wasn't to have combative conversations and relationships with parents, but it was for me to come and make a difference for students that I'm serving. So I think that is the consideration there for parents and their role and how it relates to teacher burnout, is that sometimes they had negative experiences, and then that negative experience replays itself in your interaction with them and their child.
Mm-hmm. And you know, in my own life, that seems to be true because, you know,
Mm-hmm.
when I say I'm tough on teachers, I'm bringing with me.
Pass.
I, I've had this talk with people before about like, you don't know what's in my backpack.
Mm-hmm.
So when I meet you in the hallway and you meet me and we're talking about my child, real life situation,
Sure.
and we're talking, you may not be paying attention to what's in my backpack. There's some things that I'm bringing with me, and there's some things you're bringing with you, and you might trip up on some of my educational trauma. You might trip up on some of my past experiences with schools and schooling if we're not careful with each other. But I still want to do a good job. You know, I still want, you know, like I don't love negative feedback about my kids, about the people I love the most in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't love also not knowing the things that I could be doing that helps them be better, like helps them, you know, thrive and whatever. I have heard war stories though. This is the reason I'm asking you a question. I feel like you dancing around it a little bit. I feel like you
I'm
don't
gonna
want to
go
answer
straight
it,
to it.
right?
Come on,
No, no, I
ask
mean,
me
I'm asking
again so
you.
I can answer it
You
directly.
know, I mean,
Yeah, so
you know, you hear all this stuff about
that's
like I call home,
yeah,
nobody ever calls me back. You know, I call to tell you something about your child, and you know, you hang up on me or you cuss me out or you don't call me back, and then you
numbers
get
blocked.
mad. Yeah, you get mad
Number
after
blocked.
like, you know, whatever. So I don't know if I would want to live that life if I had 30 something kids and I'm being held responsible for how they progress in life. And I'm attempting to get help out of their families to help keep them on track, or to, you know, maybe they're having an issue that in the classroom, that if you were to talk to them at home, we could work on it together.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm being held accountable, but you're not being held accountable as a parent. As tough as I am on teachers, I don't know that I would want that to be my life, because eventually I'd be like, well, damn, I can't do it alone.
And I got 29 other students,
Right.
and I'm still working within the same time constraints. So I need to decide not to abandon in any way a student ever, but I need to decide how this time is spent, and then what I can then do. Like it's like you feel like you're operating, then you have to decide to operate without that input. You have to find a way to bridge. So now I'm reaching out to, well, do they play a sport? Who's their coach in the building? What was their ninth grade teacher they just love? Right, ninth grade teachers get all the love, I swear. First year, high school. I think it's a first year high school thing. They like, when I taught ninth grade, like I to this day still have really strong relationships with those students. But understanding that I need to pivot again, like you have to understand that you could take a direction, it does not go that way. It often does not go the way. I mean, you can plan it really well, so of course you can execute that plan. But when things don't go as planned, you have to pivot, and that's definitely a moment there. Like even trying to figure out what that pivot is. I've never been to professional development. They really told me how to like build parent relationships. I'm a people person, so I'm able to do it that way. But like, where's
Wait,
that
wow.
professional
Say this
development?
again. Say this again. You never had any professional development on how to deepen
On
the relationship with parents?
No, I haven't had one. No, a direct professional development. You got to think about. We get week 2, 3 weeks at the start of a school year. I have not in 16 years had a specific professional development that spoke to that very thing. Now we know it's a lever of measurement, right? I am definitely like, um, I'm definitely evaluated on my parent relationship, how I involve parents, how I create this idea of community. But the actual 1, 2, and 3 of how to really make that work. So teachers, you're gonna be evaluated on, so you find a way to make that happen. We call parents. I've had colleagues more experienced share things with me that they've done, and I try what they've done and it's worked. But for it to be if that's a large, like that's a lever of evaluation, there should be definitely like, and not just a one-off. I think sometimes also with professional development, we get these one-off things. We get a check. Oh yeah, we did a professional development day. You have that. You're good, right? You know how to do that, right? Okay, cool. No, things to be successful, we need practice. They need to be monitored, which is why you can't do 10 at one time, because you can't monitor 10 different things at one time.
Wow.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So what is the one, maybe two things that you want to see every person in this building do well? And then that could be what you champion around to show this is what our school does and could do it well.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you where I am now, every single person does affirmations. And we can speak to that as an entire school building.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's,
Does
and
that really
again,
work? Do affirmations really work? Is that something that really
yes, it
help?
does.
It does.
And
Yeah.
you have to sometimes be creative. We realize that, as a year long, students like this, well, how many times I'm going to say, I'm Black excellence? You're always going to be Black excellence, so you can always say it. Right?
You can wear that T-shirt. Yeah.
Right. Literally. But, something like this, well, we do this in every class. I said, and hopefully your day goes well. But then, so it's some things that, we shift. Let's kind of talk about or pose a question. Let's talk about affirm. Like I was teaching, it was so poignant to me, at least. I was teaching the bluest eye. And I was like, we've been affirming ourselves all quarter. Let's affirm Pecola. Like if Pecola walked in here right now, what would you say to her to let her know that her Black is beautiful? And then what do you say to the woman in your life? So it becomes that you broaden that. So then hopefully you take from just very small introduction to our class into her character, right? Because you're being able to affirm her as a character, like you personally affirm a character in a novel you're reading. Then lets me know you understand a little bit about her and what's happening. And then lets me understand that you are aware that this exists in a society you live in. And then we understand that you can go home and affirm someone in your house. Or make sure the next time you run into someone that you think is feeling in any way the way Pecola is feeling through her experiences and trauma in the bluest eye, what can you say? Because now you're equipped to say something. Before you be like, oh, you could be completely like lost for words. I gave you an experience in this classroom, just off of a big rock from my school building that now gives you an opportunity to know how to enter a conversation in life. Because you're going to meet someone that has experience is similar, if not, of Pecola in the bluest eye, who doesn't feel good about it, that hates herself in some way. And what are you doing, Young King, to affirm her?
Wow. I actually find all of this so powerful. It needs to be part of the dialogue that we are having between school and home and community.
Sure.
When you have said in this conversation that this is a community issue, and by this, I mean teacher burnout, the idea, and teacher burnout is actually a phrase that I don't think tells the whole story, because you have made it more than that. If you are not good, then our kids aren't good, right?
Yeah.
So like, this isn't just about you burning out. This is about whether or not our kids are going to have stable, helpful people working with them every day. And if they're not, that's a problem. That's not just a problem for that teacher who's burning out, because you're not going to replace that teacher with somebody who's going to come in and get it and then not burn out too.
So how do we create these abandonment issues?
Yeah.
I've had classrooms that have had 3 different teachers in a school year.
Wow.
How are we dealing with this idea of abandonment? And then if that mirrors anything that's in this child's personal life, then how are they showing up in this space? Like just being really clear about fighting for teachers to be in the classroom. Like, what am I doing to make sure this teacher is staying in the classroom? And it has to be something for me in the middle of school year. It had to be something extremely egregious for you to let go of a teacher, because that would then mean if I made a decision at the start of the year and I realized this decision may not have been the best decision, then that requires more from me as an administrator. That requires that I in some way am going to fill in the gap of what's not happening. Because if I don't, I'm not fighting for this level of consistency for these students. And then I may be creating, not necessarily, but you could be potentially creating an entire another set of issues that trigger other things for students. I think sometimes we do, and I have a theater background, right? So we live by the term everyone's replaceable, right? I'll replace you the day of dress rehearsal. We can go up on stage at 8 p.m. and you acting like you don't know what you don't know. Everyone's replaceable. That cannot be the mentality in teaching. Because even though we can find someone else, we have to then deal with the backlash of what that replacing does for students. So we have to fight for teachers to stay in the classroom. And then definitely the ones that are talented at what they do. Like, it needs to be, you have to understand that, yes, there are thousands of teachers. You can always get a teacher's job. Like,
oop, you went out. I don't know if your mic went out. Are you still there?
Yep, I'm still
there
here.
you go. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
It sounded like it went out for a second.
Yeah, I was thinking my alert came on. I think it kind of kicked me out. But I was saying, yeah, we can't have that mentality in the profession.
Yeah, it's crazy that you have that mentality in theater. Like you can all be replaced. And maybe that's because you have people waiting in line for those roles and those parts. Like, you know, and they're ready, but you don't have that in teaching. No. I noticed that Michelle Johnson here said that too much of the instructional professional development that should be practiced and monitored is taken for granted. Toya Algren says schools should have a professional development with parents, which I totally agree with. Like, professional development, if it's a community concern, like a child is a community concern, where's the space in which we collect together to learn together about how to do this thing right? Yeah. Let's learn together at the same time. Let me have some of the professional development you're getting as a professional, and I should be getting as a parent. Yeah, let's do it together. Let's make it a community development project. Anyways, I know we're going to run short here on time, but I don't want to get out of here without hipping people to what it is you have put together here, because I think it's actually pretty fantastic. So for everybody listening and watching, Teresa runs something called Instructional Gym, and we didn't talk a ton about this, so we do have a little bit of time right now to talk about it. But Instructional Gym is Teresa's answer to showing support for teachers, affirming teachers, and helping them stay strong and stay in the classroom, and to exercise the parts of themselves that are like self-care, self-loving, self-affirming, and also getting us involved in the process. So tell us a little bit about your organization, Instructional Gym, and what it does.
So Instructional Gym is just that, a teacher consulting firm that really champions all things teacher, that we are not only looking at instruction, right? Making sure you have what you need to be your best self before students in teaching and learning, but we're also thinking about, what do you need inside and outside of the classroom? Like, what personal wellness things allows you to show up as your very best self? How then can you use your passion to fuel the great work that you're doing for students? And I think sometimes every teacher I know has a side hustle in some regard, right? How do you bridge those things to serve students? Instructional Gym is just that. I have a monthly curated subscription box that teachers receive, and in this box there's an item that's for your personal self. There's an item for your classroom that can be operational right in the moment, and then we have sometimes activities and things within the boxes that allow us to continue to build community. So definitely my website, instructionalgym.com. You can find me on social media at Instructional Gym. Definitely reach out, Linktree, for sure, to join the Facebook group, so we can have more conversation and dialogue around just, again, how do we sustain our very best in the classroom to ultimately impact student achievement.
It's a beautiful website.
Thank you.
I went through the whole thing. This is like, it's dynamic. It's like to the point. It's got like great photography. Like, you know, I'm critiquing the wrong thing right now, but I'm telling you, like, in terms of like putting your best foot forward about what you're trying to do in life, this is outstanding. In terms and you know, I'm very critical of websites, but you got a lot going on. You thought this through quite a bit. And I think it's
for a while.
You took a while to do it.
Well, well, you know, websites are labor.
Yes, I do know.
But just Instructional Gym in itself, and just even the name Instructional and Gym, the idea of like, are you fit physically fit, mentally to do the great work that you've been called to do, right?
Say what fit is again, too. Actually, we didn't talk about
Focused, yeah,
that.
fit. So is your instruction fit? Is it focused? Is it intentional? And is it tailored for students and for greater impact in the classroom? And being really, are you being fit? Like just a play on that, this idea of just being in shape all around to be your very best self.
So fit, say it again now.
Focused, intentional, and tailored instruction.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So the opposite of that would be fat. So what we need to come up with an opposite, right?
Be fit. Don't be fat.
Be fit. You know. So fit, is it focused, intentional, and tailored? I love that. Makes it simple for folks. Well, listen, I appreciate you so much for taking your morning to come here and to talk with us about this. This is an important issue. The work that you're doing, I think, actually is so clever, so novel. It's the thing that should have been like, you know, sometimes when somebody has a good idea and you think, I don't know why somebody didn't think about that before. That's what this is. This is one of those issues. So come back anytime. If you have something new that you want to talk about, come back. Let's keep talking. And then we will share out. I did share out the website to our guests who are in the chat right now so that everybody can see it. I ask all of you, reach out to Teresa if you have any questions, any thoughts. Yeah, build on this and then share it with your friends. Share it with your friends and family. Let's keep this discussion going because every day I talk about issues that get tough sometimes or whatnot. They come from a negative perspective, but it will never be negative to actually think about how we do our best to support the mental health, the professional health, the personal health of the people who are instructing our kids every day. Like that should just be a no-brainer. Like, but we need more concrete solutions. Like it's not enough just to say, oh, we should value teachers, we should respect teachers. Tell us how. Tell us how we should do it. So anyways, thank you so much, Teresa. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate everybody who gave us your brunch hour to talk about education. Once again, my favorite thing to talk about because our youth are worth it. They are all born with unsurpassable worth granted to them by a mighty God. And it's our job every day to wake up and make that true, fulfill that promise that they have. So thank you all for watching.